Welcome back, everybody, to Tide Pod, special recruiting edition of Tide Pod. We got Brandon here, back from his travels to the Under Armour All American Bowl in San Antonio. We're gonna just kind of run through that because there was a bunch of Alabama players in action. Just get some recruiting updates. With that now kind of full swing with the Crimson Tide season fully over. Brandon, I do think it would be unfair to not get your take though, because we have not talked since the Rose Bowl. We can start there though. What were your takeaways from that game? Obviously, did not go the Crimson Tide's way. We have a full recap, by the way, on this podcast, so go check that out too. But yeah, you weren't able to recap it yet. What were your thoughts? Bama falling to Michigan.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing that I actually had some time to take in the game and get the
Digest it.
24, 48 hour, 72-hour window to kind of really take everything in. Um, I think Michigan did come to play. There was a point in time where it was a close game, and I knew that you let a team like that hang around, they're definitely going to build some confidence. It looked like early on Alabama would, you know, kind of start to, separate things, but then whenever, they kind of started to get into a dogfight, well, it allowed for a dogfight. And then, late in the game when they kind of went up, it was a good opportunity to put Michigan down. And, Michigan put together a drive. Credit to JJ McCarthy for, just making some plays, especially with his arm. Some plays that I kind of didn't expect him to make. But Alabama kind of allowed those plays with a couple errors in coverage or whatever you want to call those situations. But regardless, some big time running by Blake Corum, and Michigan, withstands kind of that Bama pressure, and they went to overtime and still kind of had some momentum, and kind of with that early score put the pressure on Milrow, who didn't have his best game by any means. And ultimately it resulted in Michigan W. So kudos to Michigan on that victory, which propelled them to last night's victory. Kind of a win for college football in many respects, just to kind of restore the Big Ten. It's funny, during my travels, I had a conversation with someone, and they said the Big Ten would warrant 5 spots, which I kind of found to be insane. But it just showed some. yeah, yeah,
Huh.
I was thrown off
Okay.
by that. I was thrown off by that.
Iowa.
So I said, I was like, so does the SEC get 7 spots then? The remaining seven?
Right.
Um, because I was just really confused by it. But regardless, I think it's a good look for the Big Ten, who's been wanting to flex their muscle for some time now, especially a program like Michigan as opposed to the powerhouse Ohio State. And ultimately, college football season is over. So um, I think Alabama is in reload mode, and they have a lot of guys to, fill those spots and really focus in as a team next year and make another run.
Yeah, they're gonna try and reload with some of the guys that, of course, you've been following with this big, 2024 class. See some of them maybe step up, even the 5 stars. I know you're very high on this class of 2023 and some of them making the step up. So, yeah, we'll see. It was definitely an interesting game, and yeah, Michigan. At least Alabama lost the chance. Michigan took down Washington last night, so there you go. But let's dive into it, Brandon. The All American Bowl. You were there in San Antonio. You watched a lot of these guys play. Give us a rundown. Who was all in action, and who were you really impressed by? I noticed saw some things about Daniel Hill, who of course committed, picked Alabama. He had been waiting to make that announcement at the All American game, or all the All American Bowl, excuse me. But yeah, who was in action? Who'd you have your eye on and were impressed by?
I guess we'll start in chronological order. So, just with the UA game in Florida, and just getting the opportunity to kind of see how those guys integrated was definitely something that, I wanted to see firsthand. One name that I'll continue to be high on. Hopefully, he gets what I feel like he deserves at this point. But Jalen Mbakwe, we got to see Jalen Mbakwe kind of seamlessly transition to the defensive back spot full time. From his look versus the look of other players at this position, he definitely fit right in. He didn't stand out by any means as far as not looking the part. He definitely did do that, and you could tell that he has those instincts, the ball skills, and can definitely be an impactful player on the next level. For me, I believe Mr. Football is coming up for the state of Alabama. A lot of people would, kind of have Ryan Williams as like the front runner for that. But I think, Jalen Mbakwe makes a strong case at it. And, you know, in some respects, some would say he's deserving of that award. And in my opinion, potentially deserving of 5 stars if we give him an athlete tag. So, with all that said, I think Jalen Mbakwe definitely was someone who impressed at UA. A couple other names. Caden Jones was there, and he had a very impressive game showing. As far as practice, he just fit in. Played his role. He definitely displays a lot of versatility. But whenever the lights came on, I mean, he definitely turned up, as they would say, and had a big pick six. Definitely was impressive as far as his awareness and coverage. And to make a play like that, in a game like that, it shows that you are ready for the action. And so with his frame, I think Alabama will be able to use him in a variety of different ways. And he's just kind of a player that comes in with a chip on his shoulder. In some respects, he felt like he should have got more fanfare, especially with our rankings. And you can take that as you want, but he's a kid with some versatility, flexibility, and will come in with a chippy attitude. So, just Caden Jones is definitely one to watch who, is looking to prove a point. And then Brian Williams, the one that
Man of the
everybody
hour.
wants, yeah, and one everyone wants to know about. Definitely had an opportunity to talk with him before the UA game. I'll have an update on that later. But Ryan Williams looked the part. The first touchdown of the game, Team Ice goes across the middle, kind of a deep drag and catches it, makes a quick score, and just kind of showed that that level of competition isn't something that's above him. He's right there in the mix. Additional to that, there were times where it looked like he'd be in punt return. So just to show that he's that dynamic of an athlete around his peers, that the team felt it was important for him to be able to really get the ball any form of fashion. And then there was even a point in the game where they ran a trick play, and Michael Van Buren, who had definitely a strong showing, ultimately the ball was flipped to Ryan Williams, and he made a man miss and threw a dart for a touchdown. Just plays like that where Ryan Williams just shows that he kind of has the star ability, and no moment seems to be too big where he pretty much anytime he caught the ball, it was kind of make a man miss or get a little bit after the catch, and kind of living up to that fanfare that he's built. Talking with them as well. Alabama is still the school. Kind of feeling around, Alabama still seems to be the school. Auburn has definitely done their part, and there's questions about it. Even the fact of Antonio Coleman, his teammate, making the flip to Auburn. One thing I'm very familiar with about Ryan Williams is he's his own man. He's going to make his own decisions, and he's influential to others. But that was an Antonio Coleman decision, and something that he decided was best for himself.
Mm.
Ryan Williams' decision will be Ryan Williams' decision, and there's some kind of buzz around Terry Bussey a little bit late, but that all depends on if he actually makes it to campus. But with Ryan Williams, he's been firm to the decision Alabama, and Alabama has shown the mutual interest throughout their entire process. So as things stand right now, Alabama.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's we wanted to touch on him because yeah, that's obviously it's wild even you saying that he lives up to the fanfare. This is a guy who should in theory have another year of high school football left and has made this reclassification, and truly it seems like he has that kind of superstar potential. So good to hear. Definitely for Crimson Tide fans, it seems like he'll make his own decision whether or where whatever that may be, but it seems like it's leaning toward the Tide. What were your thoughts on some of these other guys in action then in the game in San Antonio? I know I saw Daniel Hill on some lists, who had made he had made kind of a big impact, it seemed like, and made an impression. What was your takeaway from that?
Yeah, that event, definitely had a strong grouping, as far as Alabama was concerned, as far as who they had committed and who they could potentially be involved with, and walking away from that game, you look at the numbers, and it was a really loaded event for the Crimson Tide. It just speaks to their volume and their ability to close. You look at the players that were at the event. Even like a Peyton Woodyard, who they had to flip from Georgia, a Zavier Brown, who kind of led the charge for the Peyton Woodyard flip, and kind of continue to establish that West Coast pipeline. That pair right there. Just their chemistry and their ability, to come in and work. You know, I just have a strong feeling about those two as far as how they'll fit into the Alabama defense. But that's ultimately up to them. Um, you know, you have to speak on the thing that fans want to know is the commitments, right? And Daniel Hill, Zavier Mincey. I actually had the opportunity to check out Zavier Mincey during their playoff game, and he definitely was a long, rangy cornerback. Didn't get to see him test it too much, but at that game, Florida had their staff on hand, actually defensive coordinator as well, and just to see the amount of attention that they were showing him, although they were surpassed by Miami late, and ultimately Alabama won out, but just to see the level of interest that they were showing him at the time, just demonstrated that the type of upside he had at the position, and with Daniel Hill, it was always kind of a unique situation with Hill. I've got a strong opportunity to get really familiar with the family, and just over the years, it kind of slowly fell into place that Alabama could be that school. There were murmurs at certain points in time that South Carolina was the team to beat, and South Carolina had definitely told Hill, the younger Hill at that there was definitely some opportunities for him in Columbia. And then two other programs that got involved: Mississippi State with of course the new head coach Lebby, and then even Tennessee making their push at it. But ultimately it was a Hill decision, but definitely a family decision. Meridian, Mississippi has been good to Tuscaloosa over the years, and Daniel Hill and his ability to fit into a backfield that they really want to rotate numbers. They really want to have a group of backs that you can at least have 3-4 guys toting the rock and all have options. And to add a guy like Hill, who has the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, could really create at the receiver position if called upon, with a ton of upside. You don't pass up on the opportunity. We saw early in the early signing period that Alabama was able to land Kevin Riley right down the street, and it was kind of the feeling that Alabama would take two. So whenever Jaden Baugh made the decision to choose Florida, in that decision making process, in that timeline, Alabama was able to make the push for Daniel Hill and ultimately close on him, and sealing the deal as far as getting a player that is going to fit what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on it already, but I wanted to ask about that with him and Riley. So, it's obviously running back is a little bit of a volatile position going into next year. With you still have Jace McClellan up in the air. Roydale Williams is in the portal now. The feeling it seems like is Jace McClellan's going to go to the draft, if nothing else. So, you've seen like Justice Haynes and Jam Miller. So you think Riley, and now Daniel Hill, could have a chance in year one to kind of make a splash and be part of that. What seems like it might be again more of a tag team backfield next year.
I think it's winner takes all when it comes to the two freshman backs.
Okay.
Just basically who wants to get the red shirt and who doesn't. I think they're both deserving of a red shirt. And if you're Alabama, heck, if you can both get them red shirted, that's a win. But you definitely understand kind of what the rigors of college football will look like next season. If you do make the playoff, that's 12-team tournament. So what? That's an extra potential 2 to 3 games. I mean, like as in like that's 3 games after the regular season.
Mm.
Three, I had to map out the actual number, but regardless, you do want a little bit more depth as far as what your roster looks like, and I think you kind of see that across the board that guys are going to play, and between those two, it's kind of like a who's going to be more ready to play. Some of the players already on roster. We continue to kind of skip over Richard Young. But Richard Young, is a top 250 player, for a long tenure there. He was, 5-star, and then, Justice and, so on and so forth. So, you just kind of factor those things in. I don't think Alabama is expecting for both of them to play in year one. But I do think one of them is going to have the mentality to play year one.
Yeah, so it's about who wants it more, it seems like between those two guys. Yeah, I should give Richard Young his flowers too. That's a good point. So, kind of, reflecting coming off of this, obviously landing these two four stars again, Zavier Mincey and Daniel Hill. Alabama jumped up. They were number 3, but on our team rankings now they're number 2. 27 commits. They got the 2 5 stars. They're one spot behind Georgia. Recruiting, you kind of mentioned, is going to kind of reopen up, and there's going to be some more opportunities. But what's just your kind of overall assessment with the guys they brought in? Where might they kind of turn toward now after these kind of showcase games, and just your thoughts on them jumping up to number 2?
Well, I think definitely that Alabama wanted to make a push, right?
Mm.
Um, to see this class and how it's come together over this year is definitely just been a whirlwind. There's a point in time where Alabama, was like just sitting at the 9 spot, and it was not budging, and it was a question of, so who's gonna help them finish this out? And even the numbers were, like, well, they have good numbers, but Alabama's going to make a push at guys, and they're going to land multiple players in the position. And so across the board, I think Alabama's filled a lot of needs to bring in 7 defensive backs. Just 7 guys. That's depth that you cannot pass up. And then when you look at the defensive line, well, you still have to look at the class 2023 that had 5 or 6 guys at that spot. So that's kind of been restored depth wise as well, especially at that edge rusher position that obviously adds the experience of the LT Overton. But regardless of that, you know, I just look at it as a group that is going to come in with a mentality to work. And as we see the leadership formed on this Alabama team over this offseason, especially with rising sophomore Caleb Downs expected to take on more of a leadership role on the defense, and then you have Lawson returning as well. That adds some leadership as well. So just that pair, I think the mindset of Alabama is definitely going to be strong heading into the offseason, and I think this group of freshmen will definitely fill in nicely. But we will see some surprise, most certainly, and earn some playing time. But for the most part, I think depth is definitely something you're looking at for the 2024 class.
Yeah, I like that point you made about the DBs, because I think, there's kind of two things with that. With you have so many guys leaving this year that were studs on that, in that secondary, excuse me, like this season, and then they can all turn to a guy like Downs. I think we've had this conversation before where you see what he did as a true freshman. Obviously, that's not going to be the story for anybody, but you're right. That establishes kind of that culture of you can come in here and this is the type of things you can do, not even just down the line, but maybe, right away. um yeah, and so kind of looking forward, you already kind of touched on Ryan Williams. I think we've, I don't know if we've hit that nail on the head. I don't know if you have anything else. I'm curious to, looking way beyond, at the 2025 guy, Jeremy French, and this Texas A&M possibility. I was reading the stuff about how he kind of wants to be the guy at the wide receiver position in that class. What's your thoughts on kind of that? I know, with Holloman Wiggins leaving for Texas A&M to become their receivers coach, is that something, his departure, something maybe Bama fans should be not necessarily worried, but concerned over recruits' heads maybe turning toward that with him no longer kind of in the fold?
I think at the end of the day that Alabama's history of producing receivers stumps anything that Texas A&M has done. Obviously, he can say that he wants to be the guy, but currently, right now, he is the guy in the class for Alabama, right? And French has taken visits to Florida State. Georgia has picked things back up with him. Ohio State's involved. Miami's definitely making their pitch, and you expect multiple schools to make their pitch for him, right? At the end of the day, that's what a receiver position has come down to. How much clickbait can you cause? And at the end of the day, until he decides to flip, he's committed to Alabama. Do you discredit the kid for taking a visit to a school that the receiver coach that he built a relationship with, just got to? It doesn't. There's no harm, no foul in it for him. And you know what? We're now just now starting his recruiting stretch. So he's gonna take visits. At some point, every kid takes visits in some capacity, one way or another, and you're just gonna have to respect that. So until said otherwise, until things truly heat up, until we get the feeling that, hey, he's going to go there and flip, you know, I think there's just, let's take baby steps before we go to the flip train.
Yeah, yeah. I was curious because it's so interesting. He's a 2025 guy and he committed so early and seemed really, kind of invested. But you're right. I mean, naturally people's minds are going to wander. They're going to take visits, keep their, you know, not options open, but have some consideration. I think that'd probably be irresponsible not to do that. So I think you make a really good point. Kind of
and
going
and
forward.
even
Yeah.
and yeah, even with him, you look at some of his best relationships, right? George McIntyre, they have a strong relationship. There's definitely some Alabama lineage there. DJ Pickett, they have a strong relationship. There's definitely some Alabama involvement there. So just like kind of still look at the circle, him and Ryan Williams have a close relationship. There's definitely still Alabama being very involved there. So then the kids still want to play with with guys they know they can be productive with. And although Alabama may have several receivers, to have a quarterback like San, who French has kind of developed a relationship with, you look at those things and you just have to just pay attention to that as well. But you know, Wiggins wants a splash at A&M, and why would he not push for a guy that he helped get committed at Alabama? And you have to
Yes.
respect that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Kind of going forward in general now, I don't know if you had any other notes from some of the guys you watched in the All American Bowl, other than Daniel Hill, obviously, and how big that was. You have any thoughts on that? And then just going forward now, what should Alabama fans, kind of keep an eye on? Is it just this for the next month? We wait and see, with Ryan Williams until that February 9th date, just counting down the days.
Uh, let's see which one I go. I'll go with All American again.
Yeah.
Um, well, I think there's just a strong showing across the board for the Alabama players that played in the game. Um, Amari Williams was another name that you just can't look past. Jeremiah Beeman, a player who decided to stay in state. You can't look past that. Just across the board, there was no Alabama that was ever too low. Everybody was in the mix as far as being a player that impressed day in and day out. And for Alabama to bring in this class, for this class to develop over the course of the year, kind of the versatility and the flexibility that these guys have, and the understanding of what last year's class brought in, and for Coach Saban to make that impressive of a push late down the stretch to go from essentially 9 to 5 to 4 to 2, to put together the group he did, and have the amount of all stars. It's just kudos to Nick Saban again. One of the goats. I mean, really the goat, the best that there is. And I'm expecting a lot from this group.
Yeah.
And then as far as Ryan Williams, I think clickbait will be clickbait until he signs the dotted line, and that's kind of a part of the conversation we had that I put out. But ultimately, can you knock the kid for making it this experience? You only get it one time. He definitely reclassified. He's shown kind of that he can play on this level. Obviously, you want to see it over the course of a season, but age in some respects is a number. And if you can play, you can play. And
Right.
whenever he was on the quote unquote biggest stage last week, he played. In the state championship, and most recently, he played against Bakwe, where they went head to head. Last year in the state championship, they played. Against Lipscomb Academy, they played. So he's a player. And at the end of the day, people are going to want to fight and compete for players. But I think Auburn is pretty happy, content with what they brought in. They definitely made some splashes. Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson. But until said otherwise, until Alabama's really willing to give up Ryan Williams, I think Ryan Williams understands what Alabama has, and he sticks with where he's at.
Yeah, sticks with the commitment. Well, we have a month. We're recording this on January 9th. We didn't even do that on purpose, but exactly a month to count down until that becomes official, signed on the dotted line, as you say. Um, my last thing, Brandon, this is just more of a general thing. I'm curious, for those who might not know, like just how big the All American game or All American Bowls are, like in terms of like a stock watch, like a player stock really going up, is that, do those games, mean that much? Cause it's just so much exposure, cause a lot of fans I feel like won't see these guys really unless, they're in-state guys. Maybe they're going to their high school games, whatever. How big are these games just for seeing a player's, stock rise? So if these Alabama players play really well, how high can their stock kind of climb, with a good performance?
I think it's a factor. I
Yeah.
think but I think it's a factor simply just because you get to see the players and see what they look like. For instance, like a Dylan Stewart, when I get to see him in person, he's not an Alabama commit, but to see him in person, like, showed his size, like his raw ability,
Hmm.
and that's why I take a lot of pride in being able to go see the guys in person, just to like see for myself, you know, what's going to be on the field on a
It's the eye
Saturday
test.
night. Yeah, exactly. And see what Bama's going after, right? If you get to see him with
Hmm.
your, like, when I got to see Jamie French, he was much longer than I expected, um, and just his ability to kind of get hot as a receiver was definitely something that could be contagious. Like, when he got going, he got going.
Right.
Um, but I mean, just I think they play a factor, but ultimately it's the body of work. And I don't think a guy will jump from number 50 spot to number 2 because of a bowl performance. But you
Sure.
could see, 20 spots, or if it just was just so phenomenal and you got to see him in person and like they checked every single box, then you could see a major jump. But typically, it's just going to be like maybe a little bit of a bump or two.
Yeah, yeah. I was just curious because obviously it's a lot more exposure than maybe they're used to, and then they're going up against fellow 5 stars, fellow guys who are going to excel on the college level. But that's interesting. Any final things, Brandon, with recruiting? Things to keep an eye on. Maybe a take on the national championship last night if you want, but close
No,
things out.
I'm gonna put out like a combine list.
Okay.
Just like a list of people at the combine who kind of stood out. There's a kid. Oh my gosh, I got excited about him. He's from. Gosh, I have it. What? Hold on. Give me a second.
Brandon's got to do
Okay,
the research.
I'll pull it out, but it's in my notes. But receiver from Louisiana, um, everything that you want and more. I have some videos and some
Okay.
information on him. I'd be shocked if the offer doesn't come for him. I mean, he's like legit 6 foot, easily 190, but like kind of look like was built like a back, but not really. Like, you have to, you'll see. But I'll be putting out some stuff from the combine. And as far as the national championship, I don't know if I watched a minute of it, to be honest with you. Um, Once Bama was out, my interest kind of faded. Uh, it's just my interest faded after that, so I
Yeah.
didn't get to watch it. But I'm excited about this upcoming Bama off season for sure. I want to see who's going to stand out. Um, Caleb Downs being a leader, I want to see how he even propels it, because to have that guy like leading your defense in an off season, I expect a lot of people to kind of get in line.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what shapes out. Obviously, there still might be some movement in the transfer portal both ways. I mean, we've seen a lot of that. We'll talk about that with Tony as well. But yeah, that'll wrap it up. Wanted to dive into just a big old recruiting update and some recap from the All American stuff because Brandon got to see a bunch of those guys in action and got some good takeaways. So with that, we'll close out the show. We'll be back on Friday. We'll have Tony on. We'll have Jordan on. We've got a lot of actually men's basketball stuff to get into with conference play starting. So we'll dive into all of that. So until then, we'll see you guys Friday.